In conversations of resistance and revolution, Somalia is one nation whose struggle against colonialism often goes unmentioned. What most people don't know about Somalia's anti-colonial struggle is just how incredibly resilient the Somali people were. Not only was the country colonized for 120 years from 1840 until 1960, but it was colonized by not one, not two, not three, but four imperial powers: Britain, France, Italy, and Ethiopia. Hailing from the Horn of Africa myself, the warrior spirit of my people lived on through folk songs and stories we enjoyed so much as children. The Somali people's unrelenting fight for the preservation of their faith and freedom was not only one of chivalry and pride, but as we shall see in this episode, a tapestry of human creativity and poetic expression. In the chaos of Europe's scramble for Africa, Somalia's story cannot be told without the mention of the iconic religious leader and national hero, Sayyid Muhammad Abdullah Hassan, also known to the British as the Mad Mullah. But guys, before moving on with this episode, I feel like I've been a little bit unfair. In telling our story, we're often accused of being biased and not giving credit to where credit is due. Let's give the British the credit that they deserve. The Mad Mullah is a sick name, guys. 10 points for creativity. Whoever came up with that name, it's brilliant. Like, if it were me, I wouldn't even be mad. But let's get back to the story. Born in 1856, Sayyid Muhammad hailed from a distinguished line of Islamic scholars. As was the tradition of his forefathers, Sayyid Muhammad spent much of his childhood wandering in search of religious knowledge with his family. As was the tradition of his forefathers, the Sayyid's upbringing was a nomadic one. He was born and bred in a world of highly disciplined and fortified men, where they lived in the raw elements of nature as the masters of their world and cultivated a fierce sense of pride for their way of life. At the age of 8 years old, the Sayyid was placed under the tutelage of a local scholar who taught him Quran and the rudimentary principles of the Islamic faith. By the age of 11, you guessed it, the Sayyid not only memorized the whole of the Quran by heart, but had also developed a noticeably sharp wit and clever way with words. His father kept a close watch at the boy's talent, nurturing this God-given gift. Once reaching maturity, as a young man of discernment and skill, the Sayyid would then spend the next decade or so continuing his travels to centers of knowledge across East Africa, including Mogadishu and Harad. Sitting at the feet of great scholars, his thirst for knowledge took him to new spiritual heights. It was during his pilgrimage to Mecca that he would formally be initiated into the Salihiyya Sufi order, a moment of spiritual transformation that would mark the beginning of the Sayyid's monumental journey on the path of resistance. Upon his return to Africa, Sayyid Muhammad spent years traveling, teaching, and preaching across northeast Somalia, which had come under the occupation of the British Empire. Local traditions narrate one legendary story that is said to have been the turning point in the Sayyid's decision to launch his anti-colonial struggle against European occupation. While walking amongst his fellow clansmen, the Sayyid passed by a French Catholic mission in the city. Not only were the colonialists occupying Somalia to exploit it of its natural and human resources, but it's no secret that up until the early 20th century, the Europeans were hell-bent on converting Somalis to Christianity. Of course, in the most sinister of ways, the Catholic mission would search for and take in orphan children, baptize them, and give them new Christian names. On this day, the Sayyid came across a group of these young orphans near the Catholic mission and, in typical Somali greeting, inquired of their names and their families. Now, Somalis are a deeply tribal and religious people who take great pride in their ancestral lineage. So you could imagine the shock and horror on the face of the Sayyid when these young boys responded by saying that they belonged to the clan of the Church Fathers. This encounter is said to have enraged the Sayyid unlike ever before, confirming his suspicions that the Christian colonizers in Somalia sought not only the occupation of his homeland, but more alarmingly, the elimination of Islam from the hearts of his people. This story of the Sayyid and the orphan boys is said to have triggered what is known as the Dervish movement, a nearly 30-year-long struggle first against the Ethiopian imperialists deep in the Ogaden region of western Somalia, then later on against the British and the Italians. Of course, in the eyes of the British, the Sayyid was an outlaw, madman, fanatical rebel looking to stir up trouble in the northern regions. Annoyed by their very presence, the Sayyid and his warriors eventually turned their attention to the British administration in northern Somalia and, believe it or not, to the Qadiri Sufi clans who he accused of cowardice due to their lack of resistance against the British. Just to give you an idea of the ferocity of their resistance, in 1901, a joint Anglo-Ethiopian military campaign of 17,000 men failed miserably to cause any significant casualties to the Dervish army. At best, they were only able to keep the Dervishes at bay. The Sayyid and his men were such a force to be reckoned with that even the British Vice Consul reported that in the face of the Somali Dervishes, he had never seen his men so afraid for their lives. Being the renowned orator and poet that he was, Sayyid Muhammad composed invigorating lines of poetry to inspire his people to unite against their oppressors. For the Sayyid, their struggle was a deeply religious one that held the fate of the Somali people in its hands. In an address that he made to his people, particularly those he accused of treason, the Sayyid emphatically declared, "Unbelievers have invaded your country to corrupt you and to corrupt your religion, to force you to believe in their religion, supported by their governments, their arms, and their numbers. But your faith in God and your dignity is sufficient arms. Do not then flee from their troops, nor from their greatness of their arms. God is greater than they." The Sayyid's powerful prose, however, were not only composed to ignite revolution in his people. On several occasions, the Sayyid is known to have sent letters and poems to his British adversaries to deplete their morale and mock them for their failures. In a famed letter entitled "To the English People," the Sayyid said, "I have no forts, no houses. I have no cultivated fields, no silver or gold for you to take. You gain no benefit by killing my men, and my country is no good for you. All you get from me is war. I have met your men in battle, and I have killed them. Our men who have fallen in battle have won paradise. We fight by God's order. If you wish for peace, go away from my country back to your own." The Sayyid and his warriors continued to fight until 1920, when only through a combined colonial effort that the Europeans would eventually bomb the last Dervish stronghold in the town of Taleh. Although the colonizers were successful in killing and scattering the Dervish army, the Sayyid managed to escape. But his attempts to regroup his men came to no avail, as the Sayyid was taken ill and eventually passed away shortly after. Not only was the Sayyid's profound belief in the virtue of his cause evident in his poetry, but his mastery of the Somali language proved that he also understood the eminence of the spoken word in resistance. His artistic expression played a crucial role in not only uniting the hearts of his people and mobilizing them to fight, but also proved that the front lines of resistance against oppression are many. At the heart of colonialism is the need to erase indigenous cultures and religions, to strip a people of their voices and agency, and to wipe away their collective historical memory. This, again, guys, is not a thing of the past. Europe's colonial enterprise of our day constructs and imposes narratives to justify the subjugation and dehumanization of the colonized. Guys, resistance is as much, if not more, a battle of hearts and minds as it is a battle for lands and peoples. We cannot afford to underestimate the power of the spoken word, as it is something that each and every one of us is capable of. Artistic expression, such as storytelling, poetry, film and photography, and all forms of content creation not only amplify the voices of the oppressed, but convey the pain, resilience, and aspirations of our people who are otherwise being silenced. The multi-billion-dollar colonial propaganda industry of our time may have all the funding and resources to conceal their crimes against humanity, but their anxiety and fear of losing the PR war has never been more obvious. So guys, keep narrating the stories inspired by the strength of our people. Keep singing the anthems of resistance in the face of tyranny. Do not underestimate the power of symbolism in resonating and igniting our collective spirits. Because at the end of the day, this is ultimately a fight to keep the fire of faith alive in our hearts and in the hearts of our children for generations to come. Those on the side of truth are never anxious, nor do they despair. Because as eloquently said by the Sayyid himself, God is stronger than they.